All right, welcome back. And brothers and sisters in Christ, I've got a friend whose mom is kind of in the really dark days of battling cancer, and I just ask that you lift him up. I'm not going to share his name, but God knows who he is, so if you could just say a little prayer for him, I'd appreciate it. All right, we're on Matthew chapter 17, verse 1. 6 days later, after going to Caesarea Philippi, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with them. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tabernacles here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And this isn't a reference to the tabernacle like we read about in Exodus, but the booths that were used to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles when the Israelites dwelt in booths for 7 days, we'll see in Leviticus chapter 23. Peter was so overwhelmed that he wanted to stay there with them. Verse 5, while he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground and were terrified. And Jesus came to them and touched them and said, "Get up and do not be afraid." And isn't that wonderful news? Verse 8, and lifting up their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, "Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead." Sources tell us that some of the followers of Jesus at this time were trying to make him into a political king, and in order to fulfill his mission, he did not want any interference. Verse 10, and his disciples asked him, "Why then did the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" And he answered and said, "Elijah is coming and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. So also the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. Okay, Jesus' Jewish disciples had heard, likely most their lives, that before the Messiah could come, Elijah had to return. Malachi chapter 4 verse 5 says, "Behold, I am going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord," which today we know will be when God's wrath is poured out on unbelieving Israel and mankind at during the tribulation period. In Luke chapter 1 verse 17, John the Baptist's father Zechariah had been told that John would go before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. John and Elijah both came with a prophetic message about the Messiah. Jesus' language here is somewhat cryptic, similar to his parables, to allow the believers to understand, but to hide the truth from the unbelieving. Remember in chapter 11, Jesus said, "I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and have revealed them to infants." So to those who were willing to believe in Jesus, John the Baptist functioned as Elijah, for they believed in his message that Jesus is Lord. To the religious leaders who rejected Jesus, John the Baptist did not fulfill their expectations, and John was killed, as Jesus will soon be as well. Verse 14, when they came to the crowd, a man came up to Jesus, falling on his knees before him, saying, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and is very ill, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. I brought him to your disciples, and they could not cure him." And Jesus answered and said, "You unbelieving and perverted generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him here to me." And Jesus rebuked him, and the demon came out of him, and the boy was cured at once. So Jesus was righteously frustrated here at the crowd of people, knowing the number of doubters in it, and in my opinion, even more upset with his disciples for all that they had witnessed, and after having received permission to heal supernaturally, were too weak in faith to exercise this freedom. Verse 19, then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not drive it out?" And he said to them, "Because of the littleness of your faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you." Verse 21, but this kind, referring to the demon, does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Both the source and the object of all genuine faith, even weak mustard seed-like faith, is God. And nothing will be impossible with God, stated in Luke chapter 1, verse 37. The disciples failed here by not having enough faith to simply go to God and ask, in which they would have known the method of how to drive out this type of demon. As is stated in 1 John 5, if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And obviously this would have been his will. They just didn't know because they didn't ask. Jesus used the mountain moving example to express his unlimited ability to accomplish unbelievable feats in this life if it aligns with his will, which is key. Verse 22, and while they were gathering together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. And they were deeply grieved. When they came to Capernaum, those who collected the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the 2 drachma tax? This was about 2 days of pay collected from every male over 20 to upkeep the temple. A similar concept to what we just read about in constructing the tabernacle in the book of Exodus. Verse 25, he said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect customs or poll tax? From their sons or from strangers? When Peter said from strangers, Jesus said to him, then the sons are exempt. However, so that we do not offend them, go to the sea and throw in a hook, and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for you and me. Kings did not tax their own sons, so technically Jesus, as God's son, was exempt from tax. But to avoid offense, he paid on behalf of himself and Peter. So another wonderful chapter, and hope you guys can join me tomorrow. God bless you. Take care.